Okay, perfect. So today I want to talk to you about, I'll back up a step. I was just in Kelowna and I was there on vacation with my family, and it was, we had a great time. And it was funny, we were out water skiing in the morning on maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and my father in law turns to me and says, "Yeah, I heard you have a podcast now." And I said, "Yeah, I just launched it." And I don't think Andy's ever listened to any podcast per se, but he was kind of intrigued that I had created it. And generally, he kind of finds out when I do things through other people. I don't always tell everybody all the different things that I'm up to. And he was one of about 5 people on my vacation that asked me kind of what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I thought that maybe what I would do today is kind of go into some of the reasons as to why I created the podcast, why I wrote the book, 2 books actually now, and why I'm doing Facebook Lives like this. Because I think there's probably some ideas in terms of why I'm doing this, but I thought, you know what, why don't I go kind of deep into it and really explain kind of the rationale and my intentions behind the Facebook Lives as well as the podcast and whatnot. And really, kind of the big idea for today's show is kind of how to build your personal brand to attract money and deal flow for your real estate business. So that is what I want to get into today. And I want to preface this by saying I'm not a brand expert, but what I've done is I've studied people that are in my industry and other industries that are doing what I want to do. And I've kind of modeled them. And I've also hired coaches to help me kind of create and build the foundation for what I'm building right now, which is obviously the podcast, the books, and I guess the important thing is that everything I'm doing is very intentional, and it's, even though it may seem that I've just I'm really cranking out a lot of content. I'm at now day 8 or 9 straight on Facebook. But it didn't start like that. Really, if you were to go back kind of 18 months is really when this journey started for me. It took a tremendous amount of time to really organize and figure out what I wanted to say and to find my voice. And I think that that's probably the hardest thing for most people, is to find their voice. And I don't really know how else to describe it, except for when you find it, you have the confidence to talk and share your ideas with people. And one of my first coaches, Nee, actually suggested to me, he's like, Shane, because you're always in your head, you really should be sharing what it is and practicing talking about it. And for me, the best way to practice talking was to go live. Because I tried doing podcasts with just my iPhone and recording into that, and it sounded very kind of robotic and scripted, where when I'm on a Facebook Live or doing these kind of podcasts, I feel like I'm having a conversation, because right now there's one person live, and sometimes I get 10, 20 people. Actually, I've never had 20 people, but the point is I'm having a conversation with someone, and so it makes it far more interesting, I think, for people to listen to, and I enjoy it a lot more too. So one of the things that I probably will kind of explain to you is I started off this brand building, if you will, by going on Facebook and writing stories and posts. And I've mentioned this in the actual stories of my Facebook, but I don't think I've ever talked about it on my podcast here. And that is, it took me a long time to feel comfortable to share a lot of those stories, because they're very personal, and it's not always easy to share personal stories. I remember the first time that I wrote what I thought was going to be like a great post, and I was really excited. I probably hesitated, and I think I went to get a coffee, and I thought about it, and I was like, am I really going to put this out into the world? And because now all of a sudden I'm going to have people judging me. I'm going to have people kind of, reading this, and how are they going to respond to that? And I really didn't know what kind of response or reactions I would get. So it took, and I will say that it doesn't necessarily get easier, but you build the muscle to continue. It's like going to the gym. When you do the reps, you essentially become more immune to the pain and discomfort of doing something new. And no different than going on Facebook Live. I realized that I needed to improve that. And so about 2 weeks ago, I decided that I had to start going on daily so that I could be better when I do these longer form shows. And one of the things on all my Facebooks, my posts, is that I try to stay away from negative things as much as possible. And the reason for that is I don't want to be associated with someone that is like gossipy or focuses on negative stuff, because quite frankly, there's enough of that on social media right now. I wanted people to say, okay, Shane talks about like building a life on your own terms, focusing on your values, pursuing your dreams, setting goals, like things that are frankly what I focus on and what I read up on, what I want to share with people, and hopefully helping them go from point A to point B. And talking about a bunch of garbage and crap that would easily probably entice more people, and it's almost like a feeding frenzy. I didn't want those people, and so I was very intentional to kind of repel those people that are looking for negative things, and really focused on, how can I improve and share stories on what's helped me most. So that is really kind of the kind of underlying foundation, if you will. And then what I want to talk about now are kind of 3 strategies that you could use to build your own personal brand online, if that's something of interest. Because like I said, when I was in Kelowna, I think there was several investors in some of my deals and just people that I knew that were very intrigued at what I was doing. And I think what they really wanted to know is like, could this help me in my own business? And I believe that in the next kind of 5 years, this is going to be a must in terms of, when people search my name, or anybody for that matter, you're typically going online. And it's my belief that if I can kind of influence that person so that they can get to know who Shane is without me having to spend hours in front of them. And that was kind of the conversation I had with Andy. And that was, it takes a long time to build trust and a relationship with someone, especially if they don't know who you are. But if I'm able to create a book, a podcast, talk about what my beliefs are, what my values are, and I can share that with someone in advance of them ever even meeting me, then the first time that I have a conversation with them, they have like a very good understanding of who I am. And so the timeline from no trust to no like and trust, it shrinks in terms of how much energy it takes for me to do that. So that's kind of like the big why in terms of why you may want to consider building your personal brand and starting sooner than later, because you're starting to see more and more influencers online. And it's not just for people that have kind of e-commerce or online businesses. I think you're really starting to see this even in some pretty reputable individuals. And I'll leave it at that. So the 3 strategies on building your online brand, specifically for real estate, but this could be applied to various other industries, is number 1, defining who your target audience is. And this was and still is something that I work on, and I'm constantly refining it. But what I would say is there's a great article, I think it's by Kevin Kelly, I think his name is, and it's called 1,000 True Fans. And the concept behind it is you don't need millions of people to follow you. If you can find 1,000 people that like just are passionate about what you do and love what you do, you can create a very profitable and successful business for yourself. And so that's really what I've been focused on, is kind of identifying who that audience is that I want to go after, and what do they want. So if I can identify 1,000 people that believe in what I believe in and really want to invest in commercial real estate, for example, then that is, I think it's going to be extremely beneficial as I go forward. And for me, I've got kind of three target audiences. I try to be as transparent as possible without being, without going too deep, because I think that is a tendency I have is to go too long into something. So I'm just going to stay high level so that you get kind of the big idea. And that is, for me, I've got passive investors, and those passive investors would be entrepreneurs, highly paid individuals who are looking to invest in commercial real estate. The second group or audience is people that have deal flow. So those would be commercial real estate professionals. They might be brokers, in mortgages, lawyers, and really that is going to be what I use the podcast for on kind of a go forward basis, is to start having interviews with people that are experts that I want to get to know better and that can open me up to other audiences. And then the third are real estate investors. Right now, people that want to scale out of, say, residential and get into commercial. And that is on my consulting. That's for my consulting business. So I've got my syndications, which is actually doing deals. And then I've got my consulting business, which is helping people who want to invest and do kind of the same thing that I'm doing right now. So those are kind of the three target audiences. Number two is, or strategy number two is, what's your collateral? What are people going to see when they come and search your name? And by that, there's obviously a ton of different things that you can do, but I think where most people start is a website, social media, and then number three, what I call like your pitch deck, which would be something like this, which is a pitch deck I created to go and buy apartments in Texas. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I think that simply put, like for my podcast, for example, it took me like 12 months to figure out a name, way too long. But it was really important to excuse me, it was very important to me. And so I took that extra time. I'm happy I did. But I don't want someone to wait 12 months to figure out what the website name should be or domain. Simply put, you can look for me, and it's just shanemelanson.com. I've got other domains that will point into that, but that could be a very simple start. Obviously, a logo. I mean, a great resource for that is Fiverr. I think it's Fivver. You can find a ton of professionals there that can help you with the website, the graphics. I don't want to get into the specifics because, quite frankly, that those are technical considerations. And really, what I would say is just model someone that you really like. Say, this is the website I like, but keep it simple initially, and then you can obviously expand. In terms of a platform for your website, WordPress is what I use. You can use Squarespace. There's a ton of different platforms out there. And then number three, inside the collateral, is your pitch deck. And I'll probably go into a separate video into that or podcast episode because as you can see, it's probably about 20 pages or so. And it's it's pretty, oops, probably not on screen there. It's pretty detailed. And but what I thought I would do is just kind of give you kind of high level bullet points to make sure that you've got it inside your pitch decks. Generally, you want to start with an executive summary. I always describe the problem. I then go into the opportunity. I talk about the location. I talk about the financials. I talk about the deal structure. I talk about the team and who is in part of that team. It could also be like a board of directors if you don't have them specifically inside your team. I'll give relevant experience or other real estate deals, specifically the type of income that I've made. I always have really nice looking pictures because, quite frankly, that's what most investors are looking for. And I try to keep it under 20 pages. So that's kind of high level, the pitch deck. Literally, if I went into this, I've got a whole course on how to raise capital and structure pitch decks. But for right now, I think I would just give you kind of the bullet points in terms of what you want to have inside your pitch deck. Number three strategy is OPN. And I didn't come up with this term. I have to give credit to a gentleman that I've hired to help me. And he's the gentleman that actually helped me write my second book and is really responsible for a lot of the Facebook posts and writings that I did. And the OPN, what it stands for is your own personal narrative. And that gentleman was Ryan Fletcher, or is Ryan Fletcher. So the concept, as I understand your OPN, or your own personal narrative, is really, what do you stand for? What do you believe? What do you want others to think of when they come in contact with you? And this doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. Like I said, it took me time to really kind of flesh out what my beliefs and values are. But in doing that, I created my investing religion. So I think if you go to my website, shanemelanson.com, there's a pretty lengthy blog post on there where I talk about my 10 investing, I call it my 10 investing religions or something to that effect. I've also got my 8 non-negotiables. I've also got my personal beliefs. So I've got business, I've got personal, and generally when I'm having conversations with people, they know what Shane believes, right? It could, and I listed a few here just so I could kind of explain some of those beliefs, and they don't have to be your beliefs, but likely if you're listening to this, then you probably have a similar belief or values as me, because otherwise, if you didn't, you wouldn't be listening to me. And that is all part of the whole OPN, is that you want more people that believe what you do, and then to get rid of or repel people that don't believe in what you believe. Because the reality is not everyone's going to agree with investing in commercial real estate, taking 100% responsibility for your actions, not blaming, how important my family is, living life on my terms, everything worthwhile is uphill, discipline equals freedom. I think that's from Jocko Willink. 1% daily improvement. All of these kind of principles are how I have instilled them in myself. And then what's interesting is when you talk about them and when you write about them, you have to live congruently with those beliefs, and which is kind of a side effect, if you will, of actually taking the time to create your OPN and then sharing it with people. Because as soon as you start sharing it, a big thing for me, for example, was sharing how I want to be a better dad, and it's something that I have to get back on, because I used to read to my daughters at night, and I've kind of gotten away from that, and because it's very easy for me to stay consumed in my business, thinking all the time of what am I going to talk about on the next show. Planning for the next consulting call, planning for the next day, talking to developers, whatever that happens to be, that's very easy for me to do. It's hard for me to shut down and say, okay, it's 8 o'clock. I got to get the girls ready for bed and I've got to read them a story. So just me sharing that with you right now I've got to basically say, okay, so tonight I've got to actually read to my girls. And I'm sure my wife will listen to this and she will hold me accountable. So now I think I've already kind of talked about why I wrote the books in the podcast, but I'll kind of reiterate it very quickly. And in the books, and the second book I wrote actually was taking, say I wrote, I think it was 80 posts on Facebook. And they were anywhere from, call it 500 to 1,500 words. And some of those posts took me two hours plus to write. And so a person looking at that might think, wow, like why would you spend that much energy and time into a Facebook post? And frankly, I didn't know it at first in terms of why I was doing it, but I can tell you what I was able to do from that. And that was, number one, I was able to get really clear on my OPN. Number two, I was able to repurpose that. And so I could take those posts. I had my dad actually really help me kind of organize them, and I put them into a book. And so now I've got a book with about 50 different posts. Now they had to be reformatted slightly for the book, but I was able to repurpose that. And now I've got a book that I can hand to someone who maybe doesn't know who I am, and they can basically run through it and they can see what I believe in as it relates to family, to business, to health, to relationships, and business. Sorry. And so if that person that doesn't know who Shane is now all of a sudden reads this book or a few stories in there and says, you know what, I like the way Shane thinks. I like the way this guy thinks. It's similar to me. I know that he's not going to screw me. I know that he's going to work hard. I know that everything doesn't go like as planned, right? But he's been through it, and so he's going to stick through the tough times when this deal may not go as planned. So if I was to sit down and have that conversation with someone, they might be like, you know what, I've heard that a million times. But if I can demonstrate that in a story, and I can just hand that book, and so I don't need to be there physically, then all of a sudden I'm getting more people coming to me that say, you know what, Shane, I read your book, I love what you're talking about, and I want to invest with you. Or Shane, I want you to help me and coach me in terms of how to do syndications like you. Or Shane, you know what, here's a deal, I know you're going to close on it, and that's why I'm showing it to you first. So those are all of the those are the three things I'm always thinking about in the back of my mind in terms of what am I creating, what am I putting out there, and what hopefully will it bring back to me. So that's really it. And like I said, it takes some time to refine your values, your beliefs, your principles, but it's worth it. And had I not started, had I not kind of put that first Facebook Live or Facebook post out there, I would still be in planning phase. And so what I would say to you from my own experience is that, number one, I had to separate myself from a few people in my life that were what I'll call anchors, people that were holding me back, that were either very judgmental, very opinionated, and for whatever reasons, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, but they were not supporting me and what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. So I needed to kind of get away from those people. And what I can tell you is that even one person in your life that is holding you back and judging you, for example, can really derail you in terms of you pursuing the dreams that you want. So I'm not telling you how to separate yourself from those type of people. That's up to you. But I would say the simplest thing is maybe you don't tell people what it is that you're doing initially, because frankly, you probably don't. You're not going to be able to explain it well enough, and that happened for me. I mean, initially with my wife, Kelly, who's like the person I respect the most, and whose opinion I listen to most. I knew, because I had tried other things in the past and I never either stuck with it, or it was kind of maybe she would consider it flaky, and quite frankly it probably was, that I needed to really start to do things and show her first before I could get her support. And today, now, I run all these ideas by her, because she has a very good sensitivity and kind of litmus test as to like a BS detector, or is this really good? Is this valuable? So, and she's not the person that I was talking about that I had to obviously separate myself from. It doesn't matter who that person was, but frankly, what I needed to do was get away from that so that I could pursue what it is that I wanted. And I can tell you that since that decision, it's been tremendous, because now I feel so free, and like there's no weight pushing down on me, and the doubts of, is that person going to judge me? Quite frankly, it may not even be that important. But if it is important, and you have to be honest with yourself in terms of whether or not, maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend that's kind of highly critical of new things or things that they don't understand. You know what? Maybe you just don't tell them what you're doing, as an example, or you're just very selective in what you say to those type of people. So that's kind of a bit of a divergence, but creating your OPN, it does take some time. I don't want to say that it's easy. It took me quite a while to really come up with, but I can tell you that once I got clear on who Shane was and what I stood for, it really started to attract the right people into my life. And I can tell you that in the past 12 months, some of the results that I've got from that, I mean, now I've got 2 books, 2 published books. I've got a new website. I've got over 50 videos on YouTube and my website. I've got, it was a top-ranked podcast. Hopefully it will continue to grow. And then some of the unanticipated benefits of doing this. The new connections and relationships I've made, conversations I never thought I would have, and these different paths and things that open up to you, because now new people are coming into my life, and it's incredible. So it's very difficult to know what is going to open up and what opportunities are going to come your way until you start to kind of put yourself out there. And if people really resonate with who you are, then what will happen is I think that you'll kind of get hooked on it, like me. And that's why I continue to do this. And it's not from an ego thing. It really is because I feel like I'm 1% improving every day, and I just gotta kind of continue to do it. So, and then just from a personal perspective, when I wake up now, I wake up excited to do this. I know that I'm living on purpose because I'm helping other people, I'm teaching, and I'm doing what I love. So, was it worth it? Yes. Was it a tremendous amount of work? Of course. I want to wrap up with today. I just want to kind of give you the 3 strategies. Number 1, define your target audience. If you want, I would suggest reading The 1,000 True Fans. Number 2, think about the collateral that people are going to see when they first come in contact with you. Your website, your pitch deck, your images, if you will. And then number 3, your OPN, or your own personal narrative. I'm going to have more details about the OPN in terms of how to tell stories, how to share who you are and your beliefs and growing. I've collaborated with Ryan on how to do that. It's not live yet. It's not ready. But if you want, just go to clubsyndication.com. You can put your name and email in there. You can get any one of my resources. And likely in the next probably 2 weeks from the date of this show, we should have something live. And I'll put that in an email specifically to people that are registered for any of the resources that I have, either my books or the free reports. So you can just go to clubsyndication.com. You can enter your name and email. And like I said, I'll keep you posted when I have more details on how to create and structure your own branding and OPN. So that's it for today. As always, if you have any questions, comments, you can certainly leave them below on the Facebook. And if this is the Facebook, on Facebook. And if you're listening to this podcast and you enjoyed it, by all means, I would really appreciate a 5-star review. I've got close to 50 right now, and obviously every single one I read, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. So that's it for today. Have a great day, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.